Hi everybody, this is Maureen Wong for your next stamp. One thing that I've been seeing a lot of in blog land and on the internet in the stamping community is this white embossed image with a little bit of coloring in it, with Copic coloring or other kinds of coloring. And here's another example. Now what you can do is just stamp your image in Versamark, emboss in white embossing powder, and then color your image and be done with it, which is what I've seen a lot of people do. I don't really like that method for a couple of reasons. For images with like people or animals with eyes, I think sometimes they can look a little bit scary with white faces, and so I prefer to have the face black like this. You can see on the girl, I have her eyes, nose, and mouth in black, and on the bear, his eye and mouth in black. And on my gingerbread man, he probably would look fine with white eyes and a white mouth because he is a gingerbread man, but I decided to give him black eyes and a black mouth. And the other reason why I don't like to stamp and emboss and then color is that I have heard from Copic experts that if you touch the white embossing powder with your Copic markers, it can actually melt the embossing powder and suck that substance up into your marker and eventually ruin your markers. So that's another reason why I don't like to do it like that. So today I'm going to show you a little tip about how I achieved this look, and it's really easy and safe for your markers. So what I'm using today is the Sweet Holiday Greetings set from Your Next Stamp. This just came out, and I'm using this little gingerbread man, and I'm also using his matching die to cut him out. You're going to need an acrylic block, a stamp positioner. I like the Stamp-O-Ma-Jig, your Copic markers for coloring, and actually I'm going to use the 29, and then I'm using a little scrap of craft cardstock. And then the most important thing for this method is my little tip is to use a sticky mat from an electronic die cutting machine. Now I had an extra one that I haven't used, so it doesn't have any cut marks or gouges in it. It is a little used. You can see it's kind of dirty because I've been using it a lot because I found many uses for it. I cut it down so it's about 6 by 6, so it's easier to work with than, you know, say a 12 by 12 mat. And I just keep the little cover on it. It keeps it sticky. And then what you're going to do is get your stamp positioner. I like the Stamp-O-Ma-Jig, and just stick it down on top of your sticky mat. And I'm going to press that down really firmly, and that is stuck on now. Next thing I'm going to do is position, and you can see this is a scrap I'm using that I used for something else that I wasn't happy with. I'm just going to position my craft cardstock, and it doesn't have to be butted up against the Stamp-O-Ma-Jig. In fact, I prefer that it's not, because then you're not going to move any of this when you go to color your image, and so you're going to be banging into that Stamp-O-Ma-Jig if your image is too close to the Stamp-O-Ma-Jig. So I place my cardstock a little bit away from the Stamp-O-Ma-Jig so that I don't have too many problems when I'm coloring. Sometimes it can still get in the way, but it's not that bad. You just have to maneuver around it. So what I'm going to do is take my little gingerbread man, and I'm going to place him on my cardstock where I want him, and then I'm going to get my acrylic block, and I like to stamp this way when I'm using my Stamp-O-Ma-Jig. So I'm just going to line it up in the corner of that Stamp-O-Ma-Jig like you're supposed to use it, and put the acrylic block down, and it picks up the stamp, and that'll go exactly where I want it. Next, I'm going to get out my Memento Tuxedo Black, because that is one of the best black inks for use with Copics, and it doesn't have to be a perfect image. The thing that I'm really worried about is that I want his eyes and his mouth to stay black, so I want those to stamp perfectly. If his outline doesn't stamp perfectly, that's not going to be a big deal because all of this is going to be covered up later. So once again, we take our Stamp-O-Ma-Jig, align the acrylic block up in the corner, and then very carefully stamp him down. And there we have our image. And with Memento ink, it dries almost instantly, so you can go in with your Copic coloring. And what I'm going to do is go in and color his bow tie. And you can see these are very little details. So if I stamped and embossed it first, I would definitely be touching that white embossing line with my Copic marker. And then I'm going to come in, sorry, that was R29 for his bow and his buttons, and I'm coming in with some E23, and I'm just going to flick it around on him, color in the sides, flick it around his feet, so that it'll look like he's a little bit browned from being in the oven. Which I guess is kind of cruel since I'm sort of making him realistic with the black eyes, and you wouldn't want to put a real gingerbread man who is alive into the oven, but let's just not think about that right now. And I'm just putting a little bit of shading, and then I'm going to take my colorless blender and blend out those edges a little bit. It doesn't really matter. A lot of this is going to get covered up with the white embossing, and this brown part isn't going to show very much, but I think it's just a nice little detail. So I do that. And now we're ready to overstamp this, and what I'm going to do is hit it with my anti-static powder bag. This is from Stampin' Up, I believe. And then I'm going to take my acrylic block that has the stamp on it. And remember, we haven't moved anything. I haven't moved the Stamp-O-Majig, I haven't moved the cardstock, and I haven't moved my image on the acrylic block. So it's aligned exactly how I stamped it the first time. I'm just going to take a baby wipe and wipe off whatever memento ink was left on there. And then I'm going to get my Versamark and ink that up. And once again, I'm going to take my Stamp-O-Majig, align that block right in the corner, and stamp it down very carefully. And as long as I align it perfectly, I'm going to have a Versamark outline over all those black lines, including the eyes and mouth, and we'll see how I take care of that in just a minute. So I get my embossing powder, and now we can finally take our cardstock off of the sticky mat because we're done with it now, and we can put that to the side. And then I'm just going to go ahead and put that into my white embossing powder, tap off the excess, and you can see that my little gingerbread man is, all the black lines are fully covered. Now what I'm going to do is take a very tiny paintbrush. This is a size 0 round, I guess it is. Let me see. It says on it 3/0. I don't know if that's smaller than a regular 0, but anyway, this is what I'm using. You just want a really, really tiny paintbrush for this, and I'm going to come in really close. And then what you do is wipe off where you don't want it white, and then blow it away while you're wiping. And let me see if I still have a little bit left. So let me continue wiping. Okay. And I accidentally hit into my bow tie, so what I'm going to do is just go back in and cover it again. No harm in doing it again. And this time I'm going to try and be a little bit more careful. Even though I have this tiny little paintbrush, it's kind of hard to do this while I'm talking on camera. There we go. So if you can see right there, now his eyes are going to stay black and everything else is going to emboss white. So I'm going to get my embossing gun out and my heat tool. I've noticed some people not... Okay, and there you can see he is all white now, and you see a little bit of the brown outline I did, and of course you can do a better job with that. I was just rushing it on camera. And you can see how it's perfectly red inside of his bow tie and those buttons, which would have been really hard to do with the Copic marker. So now I'm going to take the matching die and line it up. And what I've been using lately to keep my dies in place, I have the Sizzix magnetic mat on my machine, but I've also been using this blue painter's tape. It's actually really affordable. You get this giant roll and you only need to use a little bit of it at a time, and it's got a really good stick, but it comes off very easily. So this is my go-to nowadays for sticking my dies temporarily down while I cut them. Now let me go over to my machine and cut this. Okay, he is all cut out, so I'm just going to remove him, and you can see that that blue painter's tape comes up really easily. And what I do is just stick a bunch of little pieces on the side of my desk, and I always have them when I'm ready to cut things out. So here's the little gingerbread man, finished just how I like him. And here's the finished card. And I did this card with the Little Darlings crystal exactly the same way. This is a much bigger image, so what I had to do when I was putting my mat, I put my Stamp-O-Majig kind of off to the edge. It was still on the sticky part, but a little closer to the edge of the sticky mat, and then I stamped the image down as far down as I could get it. So I had to use a really big stamp block, but that's fine. And then I did the same thing. I did all the Copic coloring with her, and then I over-stamped her with the Versamark ink, and then I put on the powder and brushed all the powder off of her eyes, nose, and mouth, and off of the bear's eyes and mouth, and then I went ahead and heated it, and I came out with this. And so it's a really nice technique. I like how it looks. And those are my tips for how I prefer to do my white embossed images, white outline embossed images. So I hope this helped you a little bit, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you over at yournextstamp.com.